Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. It's called That's Mental with myself, Isabel Bartak-Healy. I am delighted to be chatting to my next guest today. Michelle is in the house. She is an occupational therapist in the field of neurodiversity and mental health. So I have so many questions to ask you, Michelle. Big thing for me is I think everyone at the moment is thinking about ADHD, okay? You either have it, you know someone that has it, or TikTok has told you you have it. I don't know if this comes up on your algorithm for you, but I feel like every time I'm scrolling, it says if you don't fold your clothes, like off your bed before you go to sleep, you're on the spectrum. What's the story with that? Are more people presenting symptoms of ADHD, or is this just kind of what our phones are telling us?
Yeah, so like it's a really good discussion to start with, and it is really interesting because I do get asked this all the time, because I work in this area. But I actually read an article on the way here that said Irish people, it was in the Irish Times, are 1 in 10 are saying they're neurodivergent.
Okay.
So that means maybe, I have ADHD, I have autism, this and that, but only half of this group in Ireland, done by the CSO, are actually diagnosed. So for some reason, we're all feeling entitled to say we have ADHD or autism, when you wouldn't go around necessarily saying, I have clinical depression or I have clinical anxiety. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there is something about it. So, is it TikTok that's influencing this trend? I do think there's an element of that. But you made a really good point there. So if you think of a TikTok video, right, it's really catchy, it's short, and mental health content at the moment is on trend, as is ADHD. So it's ticking boxes already for what we like to see on social media. And then the last thing about it is it's really generalized. So it'll say, do you fold your clothes? Or do you forget what you're saying mid-sentence? And these things are pretty relatable for actually all of us. You know, we all can say, oh, I don't fold my clothes, or yeah, I do lose my focus. But actually, is that just because I'm maybe tired or stressed versus I actually have a diagnosis of ADHD? But I think, so there's an argument both ways, because what's good about that is that maybe, I do actually have ADHD, and, by watching these videos, I then go down a rabbit hole and eventually I go to the GP and get a referral and get my diagnosis. But then the other side of the argument is that if we're all now going around saying we have it, or I'm on the spectrum, or, sure, you couldn't have ADHD, or what is it? Is it even a diagnosis? It means then that people who do have it could shy away from actually going to get diagnosed. So, like, to answer your question, I do think TikTok and social media are contributing to this more, this boom we're calling. But then I also think there's a lot of other factors contributing, like, the fact that there's a lot more money being pumped into the area of neurodiversity to promote it, to educate us. There's an ADHD Awareness Month, all of that. So there's kind of many factors, but I kind of see the TikTok one as maybe being a little bit harmful because of that reason, where, it could affect our kind of perception of what it actually is to have ADHD.
And do you think that our environment is causing people to present more traits for ADHD? Because I'm just thinking, like, our attention spans have become so different in the last 10 years because of TikTok and Instagram. I mean, like, we're used to watching something for 20 minutes. Now it's like, oh, that's 30 seconds long. I'm going to scroll past that. Are we all having like attention issues now?
Yeah, like that's a really good argument. I think we're linking attention, aren't we, to ADHD? So we think we've diagnosis. But I think the phones, absolutely, like, what it does is it fires this little neurotransmitter, dopamine, in the brain. And when we like something, then we want more. So dopamine fires and fires. So all these short videos are making that happen in our brain. And then when we start to get longer ones, then all of a sudden the dopamine doesn't fire as much. So we want catchier content. We want, better content. So you're constantly seeking more. So yeah, our attention it's trickier then when it comes to something like sitting in class or going to college. Like, that's really boring actually compared to this, flashy change in content. But the difference with something like ADD or ADHD is that my whole life, regardless of this boom in social media, I've always struggled to actually sit in class and focus and regulate my attention. So there is a difference. But yeah, I do think you're right. Like, I would say our attention now is, especially for the teens, which I work a lot with teens, and I would see that in school. Like, it's, for a lot of them, it's really tricky because of using phones.
And so I suppose for anyone listening or watching this right now, I suppose we need to talk about like what actually is ADHD, because again, we're talking about TikTok and it's saying what are some characteristics of it. And I suppose it's very individualized. People, you can say that there's, you don't need to have 5 of the traits to actually have it. So if someone was presenting to you as someone who has ADD or ADHD, what would you be looking for?
Okay. So firstly, to get an actual diagnosis is really hard. So you do have to go to a clinical psychologist or else a psychiatrist. And there's a lot of questions that you're asking. It's like 16. And then there's a lot of evidence that's taken from family members, from school. So it's actually really hard to get diagnosed, firstly. But the things, like, I don't diagnose it. We're just more an intervention service. But the things that I'd be looking out for would be, if you were saying to me, my whole life I've really struggled in school from when I was really young. Focus was really tricky. I was maybe a bit of a messer in class, or else I was a daydreamer in class. Maybe you're in your current job, like maybe you'd say things like, I'm always late. I just can't get myself organised in the morning. And, I'm really struggling in my relationships. I just, someone tells me to do something in the house. I can't do it. So that piece around initiating action is really tricky. Maybe regulating your emotions. You might find I just jump from 0 to 100. So what we call these executive functioning skills, but it's our ability to actually just function day to day in life is actually really tricky and do everyday things. So where it's different though is that, you might be listening now and think, actually, oh yeah, I struggle with all those things. But it's where it's at a very debilitating level, professionally and personally. That, your whole life, you probably have developed maybe a lot of shame around this, or depression or anxiety in the background as well.
And that's what I was going to say as well. That was my next question. Is ADHD very much linked to anxiety?
Yeah, like I would say most people that present to my service with the diagnosis of ADHD, or in fact even a lot of other neurodiverse presentations like autism and that there's a picture of anxiety, because life has been harder than maybe your peers. You're always trying to wear a mask. Maybe school was always really tiring. College was really tiring. So it comes with that then, this element of fear around, new experiences are tricky. Am I going to be good enough in my job? And so that's anxiety.
Interesting.
And you start to lose control in life. Yeah. And it's really tricky. And that's where it gets misdiagnosed.
Yeah.
So actually, that's why there's also a bit more of a boom, because people were diagnosed with anxiety in the past, but we're now realising actually they've been misdiagnosed. It was actually anxiety, that was the root of the problem. And anxiety it was actually ADHD, and the anxiety came after. It was secondary. Yeah.
And I feel like maybe, say 10 years ago, having ADHD, it was kind of like, ooh, ADHD. And I feel like it was, like, if I think about it, it was the person in the class that, couldn't sit still and always was told to get out, And it was like, oh yeah, that person has ADHD. Whereas now I feel like, oh yeah, I have ADHD. Oh yeah, I'm on the spectrum. It's so well thought about now, you know what I mean? It's like accepted into society, which is lovely to see. But it was funny because I was chatting to my parents the other day, because I'm dyslexic, and I was diagnosed with dyslexia when I was in primary school, and all like mild, I was lucky enough that it didn't interfere too much. But I said to them, I said, doesn't that go hand in hand with like ADD or ADHD? Because I've always wondered, do I have it? And they were like, well, you had dyslexia, so we just kind of assumed you might have it or might not have it. And I was like, but why didn't I get checked? But I suppose, would you say that again, you spoke about like OCD being linked, is I suppose things like dyslexia also linked to ADHD and ADD? So yeah, like under the neurodiversity umbrella, you have ADHD, ADD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia. So they all fall under that. And what we are seeing is that most people present with more than one diagnosis. Like, it's actually more rare to present with just ADHD. So a lot of people that would come to my service, whether or not they've actually gone and pursued the diagnosis, you could see traits of maybe other neurodiverse presentations. So it can be very common, yes, for people to have, let's say, ADHD and dyslexia. So it's interesting that you said that, because I would find like people, let's say the adults I see in my service who are diagnosed later in life, they're coming in with these questions saying, I don't know how this was missed. Like, how did my parents not go about and seek a diagnosis? But I think it was that thing years ago, people said, actually, you're fine. Like, And also I find it so interesting as well that apparently, and you'll have the answer to this, that women more than men mask the symptoms of ADHD, particularly in their teens, because they're known as kind of like the bubbly, high energy people, but it actually could be an undiagnosed ADHD diagnosis then. Yeah, so for girls and boys, and women, it presents differently. So for boys, actually,
most boys would be diagnosed with ADHD, so the hyperactive element would come into it. Whereas girls actually often get diagnosed with ADD, and they don't often have the hyperactive element. Because if you think back, right, when I think back at school, it was often the boys that were maybe a bit more boisterous and loud and giddy or whatever. So that was generally why they were diagnosed earlier. Whereas the girls get missed, as you said, because they mask a lot. We tend to kind of internalize what's going on for us a bit more and think about it a bit more. And actually the girls can then present with higher levels of anxiety, which could emerge rather than the ADD picture. But what I see now in adults, it's actually evening out, because as in the adult population, women and men, it's quite even in terms of that diagnosis. But it's just when you're in your teens, it is more the hyperactive piece to guys actually rather than the girls.
And is there also a big element of being hypersensitive to rejection?
Yeah.
I read that as well. Is that kind of a cross genders, or again, is that sort of more female specific?
I mean, I would say just from working with clients, I think it's across genders or across all of us, you know. And again, it's not necessarily if I have ADHD, I will be very sensitive to rejection. If I've lived a hard life, and
this is it, yeah,
because of all these things have happened. I mean, I could be like that, and I may not have ADHD.
Yeah.
So I would, but yes, like women internalize a lot, and we may think a bit more about how others view us. So, and especially young girls. So yeah, therefore it may present a bit more. We might talk about it a bit more than the guys might. I think that's where they might mask that, actually.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
And so if someone's looking at ADD or ADHD and they're thinking, how did I develop this? Is it genetic? Can we say that it's genetic? Is that where it comes from?
Yeah, there's a huge genetic component to it. So you'll often find, like most people, again, most of the younger people in my clinic, one parent will have a diagnosis. So it does run in families, and that's more kind of recent, just the discovery of this. But there is environmental factors as well. The way you were brought up, let's say, can influence it. But I think what's really important to say is it's not that our, even intellectual disability, if you are neurodivergent, it's that your brain is wired differently.
Yeah.
So therefore your parents' brain is wired differently, and that has been passed on to you. Whereas if we all experience mental health. So you might go through a period of clinical depression because something really horrendous and difficult happened to you, and then you might come out of that. Do you know what I mean? Whereas if I have ADHD, or if I have autism, I have it.
I get you. I
don't just dip in and out.
Yeah. And so when do we think medication is a good idea for someone that has ADHD? Do they need to present at a high level, or is it just a particular type of traits that they have that, someone is saying, look, I actually think this is going to help you really focus?
Yeah. So the medication piece is really, personal, right?
Yeah.
So some people actually just go down that route straight away. They get a diagnosis, and the consultant they go to might actually just say, just take meds. Whereas some consultant will say, look, let's look at the whole picture here, and maybe they would go see someone like ourselves in agrotherapy for that kind of, more routine-based approach and skill-based approach. And then if we find that, we're working with someone for a long time and actually they're really trying, but change just isn't happening and they're really struggling, that's when then we would support someone around, that conversation. Well, would it be worth trying medication? Because actually maybe it could just help shift you to then be able to put the skills in place.
Yes.
So it's actually just about your journey and where you're at with the diagnosis, if medication is useful or not. But I do see that, and this is where there's an argument around over kind of prescribing of medication for the younger population. I don't know if I agree with that, because sometimes if you go to a certain person and they prescribe medication for you, you haven't even tried the skills-based approach, it might be worth seeing, is that the way to go first? And then we advise on the meds. But I'm actually all in favour of the meds. Like, they can do absolute wonders for people who are really struggling. Like,
for instance, like, you are trying to retrain patterns in your brain to think differently about things. So say, for instance, if someone was coming to you and they had a new diagnosis and they were like, okay, I don't want to go on the medication yet, what would your thoughts be, as in, like, to journal more, to have a better routine? Like, what are the kind of things that are supposed to, kick us back into gear and help the brain work at a better level, I suppose?
Yeah. So, like, you'd go to just to explain occupational therapy, because it's actually quite confusing for a lot of people. Let's say you go to your psychologist or your psychotherapy to understand, your emotions, your thoughts and your feelings. And there might be, they might talk about journaling and helping you to unravel some of your story, let's say. Whereas occupational therapy is a lot more practical about your day-to-day function in life. So if you came to us, we'd be chatting to you about how you get up in the morning, what your morning routine is like, your day at work, what parts of the day motivate you, what parts of the day are really draining and tricky for you, what kind of people are energizing for you, what kind of people drain you. And we start to figure out a pattern throughout your day, your life, where you may be really struggling, and there are areas in your life where you're probably thinking, I wish I could do that differently, I wish I could be better at XYZ. So we break down these goals you have into really small actions day to day. So yeah, we'd be working a lot with your routine, a lot around visuals, reminders, actually the act of setting an effective goal. Like someone's goal might be, I want to go to the gym, but they might go to the gym every day for 2 hours for like 2 weeks and then say, oh God, that didn't work, I'm not going to go again. So we're trying to support people through education around, was that a realistic goal? I think there tends to be, we tend to find with our clients, there's great want to change, but actually it's really tricky to change because my goals are so out of reach. So there's huge just education around how to actually set an effective goal.
You might have anxiety about a goal, and so other people might think it's a realistic goal to them. So you're thinking like, why can't it be a realistic goal to me? And that's where you come in, and you're like, obviously you can't be comparing yourself to everyone else, and everyone's different. So just having that level of support, I'm assuming, really helps people. Yeah,
that's it. It's bringing just a realistic lens, isn't it, to your life, and actually looking at what you're trying. Because again, a lot of people who would come to our sessions would say, I've tried everything, and they actually, probably because of TikTok, know all the tools. Like, we're not coming in with anything that's unknown, to be honest. We're just making it personal to you and your situation, like whether you've kids or not, whether you're sleeping. We start to look at the whole picture like a helicopter lens, because it's not just about, certain ADHD symptoms. It's about your whole life and how all of it's kind of interacting and affecting. And if you've anxiety, if you've shame, all these things are impacting your ability to get up in the morning, get out on time and do your job or go to school or whatever.
Is sleep massively linked?
Like, sleep can be really affected. Yeah, there can be, especially with the hyperactive element. So like, a lot of people come to us will be on melatonin maybe to support them to just, have downtime at night. But then we would come in and talk a lot about sleep routines, when do I start to switch off and wind down, and what does that look like for me? And the same way, waking up in the morning, trying to be consistent with that. But yeah, I think sleep's a big one. And then anxiety can affect our sleep.
And rumination, I would imagine. So like, as in like, you're going to bed at night and you're thinking about the next day and what you need to do, and then all of a sudden you're not getting a good night's sleep and your goals aren't being met.
Yeah. And then like, if we're not sleeping, none of us could really function. Like, it's so difficult. So we actually, with our clients, with everyone, we always start with what we would call the foundations, but like sleep, exercise, diet. And people often go, oh God, I know all this. But when you actually get into it, we're all guilty of it. Like, we could all probably change some of those habits.
Yeah.
Mental health habits, physical health habits. We could all probably change them. And we always start there with our clients, say we can't expect, to be really organised, to be really focused, whether or not we have ADHD or not, but if we're not nurturing those foundations.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of our work.
Is there a kind of a fear with someone who has ADHD about getting to that level? You know what I mean? As in like being an organised person, does it kind of make them anxious? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. So what I would say is, I think there's a familiarity with maybe being disorganised.
Yeah.
And often it's like anything, if we step out of that comfort zone, yes, it possibly is scary, because people I think that I work with would say, but I won't sustain it. That's often the fear. I just feel like I'm going to go backwards. There's no point. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what I would see, like an anticipatory anxiety of, oh, but it won't work.
Yeah.
And that could be really scary. So that could prevent people from, making changes. So we would certainly try and discuss that a lot around, like, tell me about that. What's coming up for you with that goal?
How does OCD come into things then? Because again, totally different to ADHD. But again, I think with OCD, people are like, oh, it's just people who wash their hands a lot, or it's people who turn on and off light switches. But it's completely different to that. It could be like a thought pattern that can't go away, or not being able to, I suppose, correct me if I'm wrong, but is OCD really much trying to control things that you can't control?
So like OCD would be very different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the ADHD, maybe because of the hyperactive element and we're busy, you might associate it with OCD, but it doesn't fall under neurodiversity. So that would be mental health. And OCD can be so debilitating for people. It's really complex. And especially to get diagnosed, very complex to get diagnosed with it. But yeah, you have your obsessions, which then can lead to compulsions. So the hand washing, mean, so many people have OCD who don't hand wash. Like that's just kind of what we see in the media, or what's portrayed. But that's just one tiny part of it. People who hand wash, and are obsessively doing that. But to kind of answer your question, no, it is completely different. Yeah, but I think this is where TikTok, for example, with all these videos are leading us down these maybe inaccurate rabbit holes. Yeah. To think maybe we have OCD when it could be something totally different.
Is ADHD very much linked to a trauma response? We're talking about it being genetic, but can a particular event bring it out in you more?
No, I wouldn't say. Let's say that if I went through a traumatic event, such as a car accident or something, I will come out with ADHD. Yeah. But in saying that, there's so many different types of trauma. So with your kind of complex trauma, which is if I've been through kind of adverse childhood experiences such as neglect or child abuse, we are seeing that children who've gone through those experiences are more likely to present with ADHD. And that could be because if you think about that, if you've grown up with maybe a very kind of unsafe home or an inconsistent kind of caregiver or parent, your brain might be wired a little bit differently because of that, because it gets into all these other areas. But our attachment and our early days with our caregiver and all that nurturing we get actually affects how the brain grows and develops. So yeah, if you have an unsafe, inconsistent environment, you're lacking that attachment. You're lacking, maybe a very organised routine where you get up, you go to school, which can develop also these brain areas. So yes, that can lead to more ADHD presentations, which is really fascinating. Yes. But in terms of just your maybe once-off traumatic event, no, you wouldn't end up with ADHD after that.
And what about, I suppose, a traumatic birth?
I don't think that's been studied. I think it's more around the early days of development. Like they say the first 2 years are crucial to a child's development and attachment and brain areas. Like I remember before I had kids, I always kind of wondered about that. But now that I have kids and I've learned about it more, it is really interesting that, all the times that you're there for your child when they won't even remember it, but all those moments are actually, connecting and creating their little brains. But it's not to say now, by all means, if you have ADHD, that it's the fact that you weren't nurtured at birth. Not at all. Some people are just born with it and that's it, and it's genetic. It's just that it is a good point. Like it can present more in kids who have had adverse experiences.
Do you recommend, have you heard about brown noise?
Yes.
And do you recommend that to people who have ADHD because I suppose, again, when we're thinking about someone with ADHD, and again, not in every case, but I suppose a major symptom of it would just be a really busy head. You know what I mean? Again, linked with anxiety, loads of thoughts, not being able to relax, not being able to have quiet time. And they say that brown noise is really good for just relaxing the brain.
So who's they?
Exactly. So that's what I was going to say.
Yeah. No, I know. So it's a tool.
Yeah.
It's a tool just like for you or I, any of us, regardless again of ADHD, you might like it, I might like it. Like I actually sleep with that noise.
I was going to say just to reference, so there's white noise, which we all probably are aware of, and I listen to white noise when I go to sleep, and I love it. Yeah. I was only talking to someone about this the other day, and then I played brown noise for them, and they were like, "What's the difference?" And they said that brown noise kind of sounded like, not when the plane takes off, but that kind of that hum in the background when you're on a plane.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I sleep really well on planes. But it's just interesting how those kind of noises can relax certain people. Yeah. And that it can, by some people, be recommended for people with ADHD.
Yeah, like if I was working with someone, I would probably ask them, let's say when you need to work, or if it's about work or if it's about study, what helps you block out distractions? So for a lot of people, they would say, I would play maybe music or noise. But again, I wouldn't say that it's the thing that comes up every time. Yes. But yes, I love it. So I'm always thinking, how do people sleep without it? Yeah. That's so funny you do as well, because I think it's amazing. But actually I'm probably addicted now because I don't think I could sleep without it. That's the issue. But anyway, sorry. So with focus, it's always about eliminating distractions. So, everyone's so different. We all learn differently. So for some people, it's just about completely removing, visual stimuli. Other people have to remove auditory stimuli and just have brown noise. And that works for them. So it is one tool of loads of tools that we would use when we're chatting probably about focus and attention when it comes to maybe work, or else supporting people to kind of sleep and block out noise. But it's just like other tools. Like some people say to me, so should I set a reminder? But actually, you know, again, it's just a tool. Well, do you want to set a reminder? Have you ever responded to reminders? So let's experiment with that.
Yeah.
It's just figuring out what would work for you.
Yeah. And how much is our phone interfering with things? I mean, our attention span, because like it's something I'm actually trying to work on at the moment. Like I'm actually putting my phone in another room because what happens is, and we're all guilty of this, you go on the phone and you're like, I wasn't even like, I've just searched things when I didn't, you know, like you just go straight onto Instagram and I'm like, I have nothing to check. I don't. So, you know, is that really interfering with our attention span and making things difficult, particularly for people on the spectrum?
Yeah, I think it's interfering. I guess it's interfering with our life, isn't it? And our routine. So, yes, because if I'm trying to get something done and I have, let's say, ADHD, if any little thing gets in the way and distracts me, I will be hooked on that other thing, and particularly the phone, because as I was saying, it fires, really fires dopamine, so we get hooked. So yes, I think you're right. I think a lot of people I would work with, we would chat through that and be like, what would it be like to just, the phone needs to be out of sight, really? Yeah. And then for the teens I work with, it's just such a huge issue, so it has to be out of the room again. So I think that's definitely causing issues with kind of performance, let's say, in school and work.
And before I tell people where to find you and everything else, I suppose just out of curiosity, Michelle, how did you get into this area yourself? Was it something that you were particularly passionate about and you were like, you know what, I want to help people now?
Yeah, well, occupational therapy, it's like a nurse, right? So you train in loads of areas and then you go off and specialise. So I always specialise in mental health and neurodiversity. I just always loved that area. So I guess I just always had an interest in it. Yeah, I don't know. You know, they sometimes, whatever, maybe the way I was brought up or my experiences have led me here. And then, like, I was in Australia for many years and got loads of experience there. And then when I came back and set up anchor therapy, I think I just got into I'm getting more and more referrals now in the area of neurodiversity, and occupational therapy works so well in that area because it's so practical. Yeah. And people that kind of come to us and say, oh my gosh, I wish I'd met you sooner because I spent so many years trying to analyse my thoughts when I actually just needed to, you know, take action or make changes. So I'm just now, I really love it. Like, really lucky to say I love what I do.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much for chatting to us. It was completely eye-opening. I've learned loads today. If people want to find you or contact you, where can they do so?
Yeah, so the website's anchortherapy.ie and anchortherapyot on Instagram. And yeah, the best thing is to kind of contact me.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks so much, Michelle.
Thank you.
That's Mental is an Onic original.